And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is my good friend, Tony Gold. We are the Gold Dust Twins. On this episode, Tony and I are going to speak about the updates that we're getting on Ryan Sessegnon and Emile Smith Rowe. Could they be possibly coming to Fulham? We'll also be talking about a new contract for a young player that Tony and I are very high on, Devin Tan. We'll be doing that probably in the next 30 minutes. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Okay, Tony, thank you so much for doing this in short notice. Are you looking forward to doing this show?
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So let's get to it. And let's start with talking about Ryan Sessegnon. Now, I saw this morning. We're going to get to the other two topics. I'm just going to share this from Fabrizio Romano. He wasn't the first person. There have been several people that were tweeting this out, but actually, I'm sorry. I stand corrected. As a Goldman, I think Fabrizio might have been the first person. So there you go. He tweeted this out. Ryan Sessegnon just recently signs a 2-year deal with an option for a further season at Fulham. Story confirmed, unquote. So that was actually tweeted out a few hours ago, but he had a tweet earlier. So let me ask you this, because you and I have been going back and forth on this, and I know Fulham supporters are probably split on him coming back to Fulham. I'm for it because I see Ryan as someone that I think still has something to offer. He's 24 years old, Tony. You and I are going back and forth. I'll just share a little bit. It doesn't show you're moving forward. It just looks like a deal to bring in a player. It doesn't look like you're looking to get better, and again, maybe be, I don't know, just looking towards the future. It looks like just a move. I see it a little bit differently. I see it as someone that still has a lot of potential, and I really look forward to seeing him back. But I'm asking you the question: how do you feel about giving Ryan Sessegnon a second chance with Fulham?
Yeah, look, I don't have an issue with it at all, Russ. I think there is there's a story here because of the history that Ryan has with the football club. Obviously,
Yep.
Djukanovic gave him his debut back in 2016. He was 16 years old. He played a massive part in a very sort of successful period for the club, and became very quickly a fan's favourite. But as you know, with the history of our football club and how young players tend to go, is that the interest from other big clubs suddenly becomes quite important, and then suddenly these young players are being looked at and hurried away from our club where they've started out, they're building themselves up, and we can name a handful of players that's happened to over the last 5 to 10 years. I always felt that when Tottenham showed their interest in Ryan initially, he was going too early. Didn't think it was the right move at the time for him. Certainly not the right club. But as you know, money talks. The opportunity to play Champions League football, etc. For a young player like that is too good to turn down. And obviously, off he went. Now people will say, Tottenham fans will say that he wasn't good enough. He wasn't strong enough.
Yep.
He wasn't mature enough, etc., etc. There is an argument to say that perhaps he wasn't given, enough time, wasn't given the opportunity. He did go there when he was very young. And I think it all happened way too early for him. And like you said right at the beginning, he's still only 24 years old.
24 years old.
So, look, I think that him coming back is, as you said when we've spoken about it, we've got nothing to lose.
Exactly.
They're getting him on a free. He's coming back. If he can find the form that he had before he left us and get anywhere near back to the fitness and the levels that he was showing, then you know what? He'd be a great backup for Robinson.
Right.
He'd be a great option to have slightly higher up the pitch, maybe on the left-hand side. So he gives you that option. But it's all ifs, buts and maybes. my point that I made, Russ, earlier about it being just a lazy bit of business from the club is that, I can see why the club are interested and why they're getting back and why they want to come back. I get all that, the nostalgia, the history, everything else. But, we've got to be looking at more marquee, better signings than that.
Right, Tony. And what I was trying to say at the beginning, but I was really not able to get it out, is, as you were saying to me, the move itself lacks ambition. That's basically the point you were trying to make. If you look at it by itself, it's not an ambitious move. It's a no-lose move, basically. Let's call it what it is. And I agree with that. And that's the way I was looking at it, that Fulham have nothing to lose and everything to gain. But it's not an ambitious move. We're going to be talking about a potential move that would be an ambitious move. And I think that's why you were probably not against Ryan, but really just against the fact that we have not made that ambitious move yet, Tony. We're going to talk about Emile Smith Rowe coming up. That's the ambitious move I think you're looking for. And signings like that, those are the signings that we want to see. But I don't see anything wrong in a vacuum of just bringing in this player and see what you can get out of him. And maybe you find lightning in a bottle. That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah, look, if you look at his record in the Premier League in the last 5 years with Tottenham, I think he's played 38 games over 5 seasons.
That's right.
Which, when you break that down, I mean, it's horrendous. That's 5 years of his career down the Swanee. Now, a lot of that, there have been injuries, obviously. And then he had a year out at Hoffenheim where actually he did okay. He played, 20 odd games for them. And by all accounts, he did relatively well. But the Bundesliga, as you know, is very different to the Premier League. And it may be that the Premier League is just too quick, too fast for him at the moment. But like I said, if he's coming back, Fulham can get him fit. And, he can show the kind of form he had for us, in that season in the Championship where he, scored 15 goals, got Young Player of the Year, got Championship Player of the Year. If that's the kind of Ryan that we're getting, then you know what? As you say, it's a no-brainer. It's an investment that isn't going to cost Fulham anything other than the 2-year contract that they've put on the table.
That's right.
And it's as I say, the fans know him. He knows the club, and I think it's just a glove that fits the hand, quite well in that regard.
And that's kind of the way I look at it, Tony. And I've talked to others as well. You don't become a bad player overnight, okay? The situation might have not been ideal for Sessegnon, and he might not have been ready for a move like going to Tottenham, like you have already mentioned. It's a bigger club, let's call it what it is, and the pressure was on, and the abuse he got online was crazy. It was crazy. From the beginning, they were on top of him. They've been like this with every Fulham player that's gone to Tottenham. I've noticed it. Clint Dempsey, even Moussa Dembele, they were rough on him. If you go on social media in the very beginnings of Moussa Dembele going over, they are just a fan base that just basically rips their own until they prove themselves. I get that to a point, but they were just relentless on Sessegnon because the expectations, Tony, I think were so high, and they were expecting something that he never was. They were expecting a player that was going to basically go into the left, cross it in, or just attack. And that was never his game, Tony. That was never his game at Fulham. They were sold something that he just wasn't. He's a player that uses his brain and is always at the right place at the right time. He's got a great footballing brain. But what I also noticed is that he has matured as a player at Tottenham and started doing those things that they were saying that he couldn't do in the beginning of his career. He actually did develop. And I'm thinking, if you combine that, what do you have to lose if that's what he's giving Fulham? If he's an improved player and can stay healthy, we've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, no, listen, as I say, he went to Tottenham very young, and Tottenham don't have a great history of developing and improving, young players that they've signed. They've had a lot over the last, certainly 7 or 8 years, and not all of them have come to fruition for whatever reason. So, I think that at the end of the day, he gives us options. He gives Silva options. Certainly, if anything happens to Robinson, we know that he can come in, he can do it, he can do a job there. We know that if we need someone, to play a little bit higher up and be an outlet, he can go out there and he can play in that position. So he gives us a little bit more balance down the left-hand side. And as I said, if you can get him fit and get him up to speed, in the Premier League with Silva, then as I say, it fits perfectly for us.
It does. It totally does. And I've been sharing some comments, and honestly, they kind of go to what I've been seeing on social media. I think it's been more positive than negative, but I understand fans. And our co-host, Emilio Danello, if you see his tweet earlier, I don't think he's too keen on the move. He's willing to give him another chance, but I think for Emilio, and I don't have the tweet up, I think he feels that Ryan made a mistake and the way he left wasn't the greatest. And like I said, I don't have the tweet up, but I can understand that kind of feeling, that fans feel that, a little burned by the way he left. And I could get that, but I believe in second chances. So how do you feel about the fans that definitely don't want him back? Because there are fans that don't want him back at all. They're like, listen, move on. Do not bring him back.
Yeah, look, I read Emilia's tweet, and to be honest with you, I didn't disagree with it. I think there's a lot of people that feel, but listen, Ryan's not going to be the first or the last young player that leaves Fulham Football Club and takes his chances. And we've seen that already with Harvey Elliott, Carvalho, Matt O'Reilly. The list goes on and on and on. We've seen it. I think that the thing with Ryan is that, in all fairness to him, it didn't work out at Tottenham. For whatever reason, it didn't work out for Tottenham. I think Tottenham was just too much of a bigger club for him at that particular time. He left on a real high, given what he had achieved at Fulham at a very young age. And quite simply, I think that his physicality just wasn't ready for that team at that level at that time. And there's no shame in that. But obviously, at some point, his body's broken down as well, Russ, because he's been injured for so much of that time. You've got to question what the hell is going on with him physically. Were they pushing him too hard? Were they working him too hard? Were they asking him to do things that his body couldn't do? Because he never had those injuries at Fulham.
No. It's fascinating, Tony, because he's had injury after injury. So were they trying to turn him into the player that they wanted him to be, and they were asking him to do things physically that his body was rejecting?
Correct.
I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility that the physios at Tottenham had him on a regimen that just wasn't set for his body type. I don't know. I'm speculating on this. But when you see injury after injury, he looks much bigger, Tony. There's no question he put weight on. He looks more physical. But was that body type of his not ready for that? And maybe is that the reason why his body broke down? I don't know. But I do trust that he went through a medical. And again, nothing is official yet as we record this. But if he passes a medical and given another chance with Fulham, and they're like, okay with the physical, let's go ahead. Let's see where he is. But I'm with you, though. In the back of my mind, thinking, well, if he breaks down, he breaks down, because there are players that are just injury prone. But I don't think I'll say it for the 100th time. They have nothing to lose here.
No, correct. I think, every Fulham fan should keep an open mind about it. Like I said, it's not like we're going out and paying, 30 million, 20 million for him. He's coming back on a free. Yes, he left and it wasn't great, but you can't knock him for taking the opportunity when it was presented. I think that's, at the end of the day, you've got to remember, we are Fulham Football Club. We're not Man U. We're not Man City. We're not, our players are always going to be looked at if they're doing well. That's a fact. My only negative about the move, and it's not about Ryan Sessegnon coming back to Fulham. It's about, the club haven't made a signing. We're 24 days out before we go to Old Trafford to play Man United, right? And are they doing this to appease the fans? Oh, yeah, Ryan Sessegnon's coming back. It's the start. It's like, okay, I get it. I understand it. But now, where are we looking in terms of the recruitment that we really need to be competitive in the Premier League next season. And that's the issue. I don't see it at the moment. We're not seeing it at the moment. All speculation.
It's all speculation, except for when we talk about the new contract for Devin Tan. That's how we're going to end this show.
Yeah.
The speculation on Emile Smith Rowe, again, it is simply, it's talk at this point. It looks good, but until it's over the dotted line, until we see the video, until we see the announcement, nothing's been done. And that includes Sessegnon, okay? We think it's done, but until the club announce it, I don't count it as done. So is it possible that the club was looking to appease fans? I would hope not, Tony, because that's not how you should be running a business. You shouldn't be trying to just appease the fans, because the old adage is when you do that, then you become a fan yourself. You need to be looking at it as a business. And I'm with you. You and I are in lockstep. We want Fulham to be ambitious. And now we're going to focus on the second potential move here. Like I said, it's potential because it's speculation. Let's talk about this tweet from Fabrizio Romano. But this really began last night from David Ornstein on The Athletic. This is where it all began. But this is today from Fabrizio Romano. He tweeted, Fulham are also working to advance in talks to close Emile Smith Rowe deal with Arsenal. So I saw the speculation last night from David Ornstein. This is a real credited journalist, so I give it some serious weight. But Tony, for me, until it's over the line, it's not done. But it's exciting. You and I have talked about this a great deal. The one thing before I want to ask you, before we really dive into him, really about how he would fit and everything, the speculation is a good amount of money because Fulham were already reportedly rejected a bid. And apparently it's been reported that they came back with a bid. Now, again, this could be add-ons. I don't know. It's all speculation of a number of £35 million. So I'm going to ask the question, one, do you want the player? But two, could Fulham be paying too much for Emile Smith Rowe if the speculation is true that it's £35 million?
So in answer to the first question, yes, absolutely want the player 100%. If we get the Emile Smith Rowe that was Arsenal before his injury playing, I mean, he's an upgrade on anything that we've got at the football club, and he's in a very exciting football player. There's no question that Fulham will have to beat their club record fee, which I think they paid, it was 27 million for Seri. So they will smash that by signing Smith Rowe. And I think 35 million quid is probably bang on the money in terms of the quality of player that you're getting. But yeah, look, there's going to be question marks, Russ, because he's been out all season pretty much with that injury. We're not sure, if he's going to rediscover that form and the quality that he had. And you've got to remember also is that he was playing in a very, very strong Arsenal team as well. So he had very good players around him. But look, he's another player that comes in and offers you something different. He's quite versatile. He can play wide right. He can play in the Pereira role. And you know how I feel about that area. But I think he's a player that can score goals. I genuinely do. I think he's got that in his locker. And that's something in that area that we really miss at the moment. So for me, if it's 35 million plus add-ons, Fulham should get the deal done and get it over the line and get him in ASAP, because there are going to be other clubs that are interested. There's no question about it. And we can't be seen hanging around if it's there. And we know that he didn't play for Arsenal the other night against Bournemouth in America. So we know that he wasn't there. So there's obviously something going on. But that could be, Fulham could be one of several clubs that are talking to him. So we need to move quickly and we need to get it done. Okay.
And I'll throw this out to you. Let's say it happens. We pay £35 million for him. He is a very young player, still very young, Tony.
Yeah, 23.
23. So you have a chance to, I hate to say this, flip him in a few years, maybe double your money. So I'm just saying that business-wise, this could potentially be a huge move if he is the player that we all think he's going to turn into. I don't want to say let's move on a player and he hasn't become a Fulham player yet, but you do have to think about that. And you want to hold on to him as long as you can. But if he's as good as people say he is, that eventually he would move on, but you might really be able to get serious money for this player because he's so young now. This is what they should be targeting a player like this. Try to see if he's going to stay for 2, 3, 4 years. But even if he goes in a couple of years, you can flip him for a lot of money, Tony. And I think that's a valuable part of this situation.
Yeah. I mean, you're always looking to buy with the opportunity to invest further down the line. And obviously, if we sign him and he ends up playing and then rediscovers that form that he had at Arsenal, and you've got to remember, this is a kid that's played over 80 games for Arsenal, or around 80 games for Arsenal. So he's no mug. And I think he had a couple of loan spells at Leipzig and Huddersfield at some point as well. But, look, if he rediscovers that form, I would suggest that, 2 years' time, if he's still here and he's still playing, of course, another big club will probably come in for him and you could well double your investment. But, that's going back to the point again about us selling our best players and wanting to push on to be more than just a feeder club for other clubs in the Premier League and just for us, to exist. We want to be pressing for European football. We should be wanting to do that. That should be an ambition. Every fan wants it. Every club wants it. Why can't we? Why do we have to be that club? So I just think that, first of all, get the deal done. Second of all, get him fit and Silva getting him back to playing to the levels that he was, when he was at Arsenal. And that will be a fantastic investment. And I think a very exciting player. Very exciting.
Totally agree with you. And listen, I just fell into the trap. You and I have talked about this a lot. I want Fulham to build. And how do you build? You hold on to your best players. And of all people, shouldn't be saying, well, you know what, we can double our money, because I don't care how much money you can get. I want to keep the player. But if we're being realistic and Fulham have not gotten to Europe or not pushing for Europe, then doubling your money is not the worst thing. But I think what you should be looking for is trying to build something towards Europe. And if he helps you there, maybe you convince him to stay. Maybe you become a different type of Fulham. Maybe you become a team that is on the cusp of Europe each and every season. He could be a player that could get you there. So I shouldn't even have gone there yet about talking about doubling our money. How about getting the player and see if we can push to Europe? That's what I should be focusing on. But it's hard not to think about what you can get from it. But I agree with you, Tony. We should be building something. We should be ambitious rather than thinking, you know what, we got to flip them in a couple of years. It's a good point. Before we move on, I want to share a couple comments. They go on to talking about Pereira. This is from our friend Colm. Does this Emile Smith Rowe coming mean Pereira might be off? I know he can play either side as well. He just prefers the attacking midfield role. I know how you feel about this. He can play on the left. He can play central, but it's funny. I was looking at a lot of his highlights, and most of his best moments are central. So you tell me, if he comes, what would you do if you're Marco? Would you try to see?
I think he's the player that needs to give Pereira a bit of a push. Actually, there's going to be that little bit of competitive edge, and I think actually that will improve Pereira if he's got anything about him. There's nothing wrong with a bit of competition. I think with Smith Rowe, I think as a player, he's very direct. He's always got his head up. He's always looking forward. Right, he's got a very good touch, and he's very good in possession. So, and he's also got great energy and a good work ethic about him. So I think personally, I believe he's an upgrade on Pereira. But as I said, because he's been out for that pretty much that season, he's got to get back to speed, get back into the game, get his confidence back. And I believe that Silva can do that. So I like the competition, and actually it could give Pereira the little kick up the backside that I think he's just got a little bit too comfortable. And, he's being allowed to coast through games because Silva never really takes him off, never changes him really. But if Smith Rowe comes in, he's now got the luxury of looking at it thinking, right, you know what, we've got a bit of competition. And that's what this team needs. This is what we need, Russ. We need that competition. We need players not comfortable, but, fighting for their shirt every week.
Totally agree, Tony. That's why I know how you feel about Pereira, but I like the fact that you were willing to look at this as competition for Pereira and make him basically fight for his position. And I like that. And the fact that Emile Smith Rowe can play on the left, can play in several positions is a really good asset to have, and allows Silva to move the chess pieces around the board. So this is a very good situation. Yes, he can play central, but he can play at the left too. He can push the left-hand side. We have Sessegnon. Again, if this happens, you have options. We need options everywhere. It's been a poor window because no one's come in. I think if you look at the players that they currently have, there's some very good players there, but you need quality to add to it. Sessegnon on a free would not be a bad thing, and then bringing this player in is a really good move. It's a fantastic move. I'm going to share this comment from our friend Fulham and Dayton, who I have actually met in person in Philadelphia. He goes back to our conversation. You can't ignore the fact that he could be a long-term investment that returns a big fee if he does well. We want Europe, but also be aware that we could get a large return on investment on and off the pitch. It's a good point, and that's kind of what we've been talking about, Tony.
Yeah, 100%. And we've seen it with Polinia recently, Mitrovic. You know, we've made a lot of money on all of those players. So, yeah, there's no question about that. No question.
Okay, here's from Gary D. again talking about Pereira. Evening, gents. Great news today. Think Pereira will drop back deeper in midfield. Smith Rowe more creative. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm not. I mean, look, Pereira, as I say, you know, you want your good technical players on the ball. Yeah, that's an option. He could drop Pereira, you know, back in there alongside one of the more holding midfield players and give us that little bit more quality on the ball. That's something that he'll have to try. Whether it will work or not, you know, who knows? But ultimately, as I said, what it does is it gives everyone in the squad a bit more competition and means that people have got to work and be a bit more hungry when they're out on the pitch to do better. And I think last season for me, as I say, Pereira didn't really have that, and he coasted through games because he knew he could. And I think he's got a lot more to give. And I think if he's got that little kick up the backside, knowing that he's got that there, then maybe that will, you know, give him that.
Okay, excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone who is watching live. Tony, we have almost 300 people watching live. We did this ad hoc at the last minute. Think about this. We have almost 300 people watching live with us. Thank you, everyone. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in talking about Fulham right now, and I'm glad that we could do this show for everyone. Coming up next, we're actually going to talk about a young player who we both feel has a bright future with Fulham. Okay, Tony. To end this show, probably for the next 10, 15 minutes, I want to talk about a player I've talked to you about a great deal. I saw in Philadelphia, and I think has a bright future with Fulham. Extreme bright future. Devin Tanton signs a new 2-year deal with Fulham with a club option for another year. Very young player, right back. And this is a player that I watched in that match against Tottenham, but I watched him here in America, and I've seen him play enough to see a quality player. And Fulham currently have 2 right backs, okay? But for me, Tony, I think you got to give this kid a chance. You have to give this kid a chance. So I'm going to ask you the question. Do you want to see Devin Tanton get a chance to play with the first team this season or go out on loan? I don't want to see him go out on loan. That's where I stand on this.
Yeah, it's a really tough one, and I think Silva will be thinking long and hard about what he does. Obviously, he signed a 2-year contract, which means that he's going to be around for at least 2 more years. With Tete and Castagna, obviously, you know, regular first teamers at the moment, it's going to be tough. I mean, I think he'll be in and around the squad, Russ. Yep. But I mean, personally, for his development, it's more than likely that they will put him out on loan somewhere, maybe a championship side potentially, to see how he gets on, because he needs games. He needs to see if he can handle himself physically. But you know my opinion on young players. I think that ultimately this is a kid that's, you know, represented the USA. He's now gone over to Colombia. I think he's already had an international cap with the first team.
That's right.
At international level. So, you know, I'm a big believer of if you're good enough, it doesn't matter what age you are, throw them in. Just look at, you know, Emile at Barcelona. He's 16 years old and he's already, you know, playing for Barcelona, won the European Championship. You know, he's already 16 years old. If you're good enough, you're good enough. So I personally would give him the opportunity and let him push the other two. I think we all agree that Tete's, you know, days maybe at the club are coming to an end. You know, I think he's Mr. Reliable to a degree, but I don't think he's at the, you know, when Castagna just has that little bit more consistency.
That's
about
right.
him. So, you know what? Tanton is a great backup and he's a great option to bring in and feed. And he's one of these players that you don't want to lose. You don't want to lose because he's not playing enough football.
Right, Tony. And that gets to the rub here, because if you're asking me, I want him to get every chance he can to win that backup position from Kenny Tete, okay? If Marco feels that Kenny Tete and Tanton are at the same level, meaning that Tanton has impressed him that much, I think they have to consider selling Tete.
Yeah.
Because this player, I think, has the opportunity to potentially be the right back for Fulham Football Club. Do you just send him out on loan? I'm saying you don't if he's the backup, because you can play him in the cup matches. He's playing with the first team. He might come in for the occasional match to spell Castagna. So would it be so terrible? Now, I know the argument's going to be play him in the championship. I think right now he's too good for the championship. I've seen enough. I really believe that about Devin Tanton. The fact that Colombia gave him a chance. We're talking Colombia now. They are a team on the rise worldwide right now, and they are a very good side. For him to break in there, that tells you all you need to know. I want to see him get every opportunity to play with the first team this season. I don't want him to go out on loan. The only way I would let him go out on loan is he did not measure up to Kenny Tete. If Kenny Tete's better, that's fine. But give him the chance to beat out Kenny Tete. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the difference between the two players ultimately is that Kenny Tete's got a bit more experience. You know, in terms of playing ability, I think Devin Tanton's got, you know, far greater attributes actually. You know, the way he's been coached, the way he's been brought through, you can see it. But I think that Fulham will protect him. Silva will protect him. We know that Silva likes to protect young players. He doesn't like to throw them in too early.
I know.
We've got it with the Figueroas at the moment. You know, he's another one that we've spoken about many times.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to see him given that opportunity as well, Russ. But I think that, you know, it's about balance. And I think ultimately you're asking a lot for a young lad like that to come into a, you know, not the greatest back four. Let's be honest, you know, in the world. And Diop doesn't fill you with the greatest of confidence. He'd be playing alongside.
No, he does not.
So, you know, I think they've got to be careful. I think we might see him in some of the cup competitions, given an opportunity. And, you know, look, it all depends how he's getting on in training, how he's developing, how he's doing amongst the group. And he's obviously doing well enough because they've offered him a 2-year contract. So, you know, he's obviously a player they think of very highly. It's just about whether or not Silva thinks he can offer something a little bit different in that area of the pitch. And I think he can. But it's one of those, isn't it? It's that sort of risk factor.
Right. And what's interesting about this is that Silva's style is about risk, but when it comes to young players, he doesn't show much risk. Let's be honest. He sticks with the known commodities. He doesn't really go with risk. I guess you could say reclamation projects are a risk, but why doesn't he allow the young players a chance to prove themselves? Like I said, I've already seen Tan play. I've seen the Figueroas play. They played against Premier League competition, yes, preseason, but I've seen them do it. They're not fazed by this. Tanton's not fazed by this. So I understand, and I'll share this from my friend Fulman Dayton. He's making the argument that he should go out on loan for first-team football. I get that. I understand that. But as you said, Tony, I go back to this. if the kid is good enough and he's the equal of Kenny Tete, sell Kenny Tete, get some money for him, and let's move on. That's the way I'm looking at it. If you're telling me he's not at that level, maybe it is the experience difference, fine. Then that's it. Then he goes out alone. But I want him to have every opportunity to push Kenny Tete. I really do.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, as long as I don't see Mbabu back in a Fulham shirt, I don't care.
Let's not talk about that. Let's not go back.
But yeah, no, seriously, I think that ultimately, I would like to see it, but I think realistically, I think, Fulham in Dayton is probably right. As I say, I think he will end up going out on loan.
I know you guys are right. I know you're right. I know I'm not going to be right here. I know that.
He'll get a decent amount of football, and then it might be just a short loan period somewhere where he can get a handful of that experience and games and the level, and then he'll come back and you never know what can happen. But look, at the moment our squad is very, very short. It's very short. We are a couple of injuries away from being banging trouble. So the next sort of 2-3 weeks is massive in terms of our recruitment and where we go. So we need to be, very mindful of that and make sure that we get these deals done and over the line.
I totally agree. And before we wrap this up, other players that have been rumored to Fulham, Scott McTominay, Andre. Now, what's interesting is that our friend Fulham Fan News just actually tweeted out that Fluminense looks like they have their replacement for Andre lined up. So we'll see what happens with that. I certainly would like to see Andre come in. Scott McTominay is an interesting one. I want to get your thoughts on both these players before we wrap this up.
So Andre's looking more and more likely, given the news and behind it, and obviously all the rumours and everything. So that is looking, more likely. And yeah, look, I don't know enough about him, Russ, as a player to comment on what his qualities are. I haven't seen enough of him, but the talk is that there's a number of players that seen him play recently. In fact, only a few days ago, and said that he was very good in there. He did a good job. He's always looking for the ball, always looking to get on, looks to break up the play. So the talk around him is obviously very positive, and Fulham feel like, and Silva obviously feels like he'll add something. So that looks like that's something that could happen. I can't see Scott McTominay coming to Fulham. I just can't see it. However much I think I'd like to see it, because, as I said to you in the previous program that we did, I think he's a player that's actually improved. And I've seen different qualities in him, but I just don't see him leaving Manchester United to come to Fulham. I don't see it.
I don't either. And this is his club. Why would he want to come to Fulham unless it's to play regularly, which is always a draw? Why would you want to leave Manchester United? I'm not against it, but I just don't see it happening. Anyways, Tony, listen, we're going to wrap up this show. Thank you so much for doing this at the last minute. I just want to mention this before we go. Right now, we have 370 live listeners. 370 live listeners. I can't remember the last time I've done a show with that many listeners. So I just want to thank everyone that has watched live here, and just thank you very much. Tony, final thoughts before we go.
Yeah, look, the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting. Everyone should keep their ears to the ground and be quite excited, because I think we are going to make some, marquee signings, definitely. Just be patient, and let's see where we are in sort of 2 weeks' time. Okay, excellent. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other phone supporters find us. That's going to do it for this episode. My name's Russ Goldman. He's Tony Gold. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.